This week on the Big Ten Team Rivalry Show,
Northwestern rises from the grave and then immediately dies again.
Michigan empties another stadium in an absolute shucking of Nebraska.
Iowa technically won, but really all of us watching lost.
Plus recaps for Week 5, picks for Week 6. You're watching the Big Ten Team Rivalry Show. Thanks for watching. Stick around for more.
First up, we've got Penn State, Illinois. We're going to go through each of the games. Well, we got 3 games. First up, Penn State, Illinois. We got 5 minutes for each game.
Looking for some bigger prey. They're hungry for that bigger win, and this could be it. If they can take down Penn State. I said, nevertheless. Why did I say I said?
The former third string, now second string quarterback. And people on Twitter are talking. Should he be the starter now?
Welcome back to the Big Ten Team Rivalry Show. I am your host, Clifford the Dog Richardson. That's data analyst with grit for the uninitiated. With me, as always, is the angry pigskin himself, commentator extraordinaire, Mac. How's it going, Mac?
It's going, but I got to ask. Brian Ferentz's 25-point average that he has to get, does that include special teams and defensive scores? Because I think that might be the only way he saves his job.
Yeah, thank you. Also, to all of our subscribers and to everyone watching, this is the channel where we are in a never-ending pursuit to make football fun again with oddball statistics and an enthusiasm for personal bias and a little friendly rivalry on the side.
Speaking of which, I told you Illinois wasn't going anywhere this year.
We'll get to that. First, let's take a look at our ranked games from last weekend. That's Michigan at Nebraska and Penn State at Northwestern.
You know what separates the winners from the losers, kid? The score.
So our first game we want to talk about from last week is number 6 Penn State at Northwestern. I think Penn State was a little surprised by the first half against Northwestern. Mac, what happened?
Yeah, I think Northwestern gave Penn State everything that they could handle in the first half, and Penn State just wasn't ready for it. So I thought Drew Aller looked shaky at best throughout most of that first half. I mean, the Nittany Lions offense in general just felt really out of sync. But then, like, once Northwestern ran out of gas in the second half, that kind of allowed Penn State to get back on track, which obviously they did in a big way. But it really took Northwestern running out of gas for that to happen. Now, so defensively, Penn State played pretty well the entire game, despite giving up some pass plays. Northwestern converted a couple of long third down conversions. One thing that I do want to call out, though, is that Penn State had 4 possessions in the second half that started in Northwestern territory. All of those ended in a score. Okay. They had 2 possessions start in the on their own half, and only one of those went for a score. So they had 4 possessions start on the Northwestern half. All of those went for a touchdown or a field goal. They had 2 possessions that started on their own half in the second half. Man, this is hard to keep track of. They had 2 possessions in the second half that started on their side of the field. That's better. Only one of those went for a score. The other one they had to punt. Okay, so I'm wondering if this game would have been maybe a little bit closer had Northwestern not been stopped on so many 4th down attempts in their own end, because Penn State only scored on 3 of 7 drives that had started in their own half. So if they got the ball starting in their own half, they only scored on 3 of the 7 drives that started on their own half. Does that make sense? Am I making sense here?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think part of what you were talking about, them running out of gas, that was surprising to me, given you had that opening drive where Northwestern kicks it off and Penn State fumbles the ball immediately.
Yeah.
Northwestern gets it. They only got a field goal out of it, but still to do that to Penn State, and then just to have the power Northwestern displayed in that first half, holding the score to, what was it at the end of the first half, 10-10?
10, yeah, I think so. Yep, 10-10.
I mean, it looked like, for sure. I know we were talking about it during the game, that we were talking upset at that point, that Northwestern maybe was going to pull this off. And then, as we said, they ran out of gas coming back from the half. Although it was, let's see, Penn State was about halfway through the third quarter when they kicked the doors open. They got that touchdown, and then it was just daylight for them from then on out. Northwestern was done. I
Mhm.
don't understand that. I don't understand how a team like Northwestern, a Big Ten FBS team, can run out of steam like that. What happened to cause them to no longer be able to keep up with Penn State?
They just don't have the roster right now, I think. They don't have the roster to keep up with a Penn State right now. Because Penn State for all of their inconsistencies in on offense. I mean, the defense has been phenomenal. But for all of the inconsistencies on offense and stuff like that, they're still a stronger team. And they've been the stronger team in every game they've played so far this season. And so yeah, against a team like Northwestern, where Northwestern is playing their hearts out in the first half, like, yeah, eventually Penn State's just going to run them out of gas, and then they're going to be able to do what they do best. The thing that gets me, though, is that if Northwestern kind of hadn't run out of gas and hadn't maybe even just punted on a lot of those fourth downs that they tried for, I'm kind of wondering if Penn State, I mean, maybe at this point we're looking at like a 30-13 kind of situation like they had against Illinois. But like,
Yeah.
So I think it comes down to Northwestern just not having the roster, but Penn State, like, I don't know, when Northwestern was competitive, Penn State didn't look great.
No, they didn't. But yeah, I think you're right. I think Northwestern, when it comes down to it, is still a one-dimensional team. They've got some wind behind them now. They've got some strength to hold up. It's amazing that Northwestern held up against Penn State as long as they did. That's what was so impressive. Even just getting a half and then half a quarter out of it was still pretty amazing, which I think bodes well for Northwestern. Just not Saturday.
Yeah, I know Northwestern looks a lot better than we thought they would. I think we kind of all thought that they were going to roll over and go 0-12 this year, but
Right.
Credit where credit's due. They've looked a lot better this year than we expected.
Right. And then where does that leave Penn State? Are they really the number 6 team we think they are? Which we really won't know until we get into the next couple of weeks. Next up, number 2, Michigan at Nebraska. The game ended 45-7, Michigan, but we saw some varied takes on the game prior. One of the big concerns from Nebraska fans was if they could even score against this Michigan defense. The biggest concern, it seems, from Michigan fans was that it was going to be windy in Nebraska, and was that going to throw off McCarthy's passing game? But it's always windy in Nebraska. So, Mac, what happened in this game?
Is it always windy in Nebraska?
I mean, it's
Nebraska's
a
kind of
flat
flat, I
state.
guess.
It's always windy.
It is
in
a flat state. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, no, the wind didn't do anything to limit McCarthy. There was one throw, and I can't remember the circumstance because there were a lot of throws in that game. There was one throw where I thought it might have affected him a little bit because he kind of sailed it. But no, I mean, McCarthy had 2 extremely impressive touchdown passes and a nice touchdown run as well. So he played phenomenally. And yeah, I mean, there wasn't much that you could say that Michigan did wrong. I mean, they had only 2 drives that didn't end in points, one of which was in garbage time with the backup defense or offense in, because it's the offense that generally scores points unless you're Iowa. Yeah, I was really impressed with Michigan's backup quarterbacks in the fourth quarter as well. I mean, I thought Denegal played well. I thought Jack Tuttle played well. Davis Warren, I think, kind of needs to develop a little bit more, but maybe there's something there. But frankly, that's a huge relief considering even just a couple of weeks ago, it felt like the drop off from JJ McCarthy to the next guy was like falling off a cliff. So, no pun intended. Does that count as a pun if your name is whatever? One interesting thing, though. What?
Sorry, I just lost track there. Keep going. Keep going. We're good.
All right. Well, one interesting thing I will say, though. So the emergence of Khalil Mullings, I think, whatever,
Sure.
as the running back 2 or RB2. So I guess I'm a little disappointed that Donovan Edwards hasn't really had the season he's been hoping for just yet. But really, I don't think he broke onto the scene last year until about the second half of the season. I want to say. And I think that's probably because the O-line needed a few games to gel. And I think from what we saw at Nebraska was an O-line that's actually ahead of schedule, in my opinion, just compared to what we saw last year. So I think as the O-line gets better, then you will see more of a run game with Edwards. But Khalil Mullings is kind of like Hassan Haskins, what he used to be, that kind of thunderous back that just kind of plowed through everybody like a bowling ball.
Yeah.
And smashed his way into the end zone. I mean, that's really what that 20-yard touchdown run that he had looked like.
Right. The
But
tank.
that being
That's
said,
what we used to call Haskins,
like a
the
tank,
tank.
yeah.
Yeah.
But even so, even if the running game needs a little help on a certain Saturday, I mean, with a quarterback like McCarthy right now, Michigan has options on offense, and that is a amazing thing for them. That's going to win them a lot of games.
Yeah, one of the things that impressed me in that regard is that Michigan dominated this game in virtually every way. The only point they didn't, which is interesting to me, is that they didn't. Well, you know what? No, I'm sorry. Now I got to take that back because I keep having to remind myself of the score, which was 45-7. I want to say Michigan had less production versus time because their possession time was 38 minutes compared to Nebraska's 21 minutes. But
It's crazy.
but it doesn't matter because Michigan scored 38 points more than Nebraska did. So, I mean, you're close to the point a minute there, team. Um, if we're just going off of possession, but they dominated in almost every way, except ironically in passing yards. Passing yards, they were about even, with Nebraska having just a few more. Um, Sorry that I keep saying but they McCarthy had he was 16 for 23, where Nebraska's quarterback was 14 for 25. I forgot Nebraska's quarterback's name. It just jumped out of my head.
Henrik Harburg.
Henrik Harburg. Yeah, that's right. Oh yeah, this is the one that.
Also,
go ahead.
Well, but also real quick, McCarthy was 12 for 16. Quarterbacks as a whole were 16 for 23.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like you said, even with the backups, they were doing really well. Otherwise, I guess all of that aside, it was just a fun game to watch. I think what we saw, like I said, Michigan dominated. This game was just fun. They ran around that field with purpose. They looked like a fast team, a team with purpose and with determination, and they took Nebraska down. Now, I grant you, this is at a time when you could say Nebraska couldn't keep up with them anyway, but let's not lose sight of the fact that Nebraska has big, strong players. Even in the worst of times, they still have a good, solid team, and Matt Rule is a good, solid coach. But there's our enthusiasm for personal bias. I think this was a good win. I think Michigan looked fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was easily their most complete game, and I think it was probably the fastest and most competent we've seen the offense. And that's not to say that the offense was ever incompetent. It's just, they didn't score as much in the other games. So like,
Right.
I mean, they did more in this game, and they were far more in control in this game than it kind of maybe felt with the first three games, even though they were totally in control of those games. It's just when you're playing opponents like that, normally you're expecting, 50 burgers, not 35 points. But the thing with Michigan is that they're not attempting to put up that many points. They're very slow, methodical drives. The problem is that they're so effective is that even if they are slow and they do take their time, you're not going to stop them. And I mean, Nebraska, even I think on a good year, probably couldn't have stopped that team on Saturday.
I wish I could remember their name. I'll have to go try to find the channel again. I'm sure it's in my YouTube history, but Nebraska fan actually said Michigan could have run up the score a lot higher than they did and hit 70, 75 points, but they didn't because Harbaugh has a soul. That's what they said. And then they compared him to Ryan Day, who would have run up the score just because he could.
Wow. Yeah.
I appreciated that. Next.
Taking sides in the Big Ten.
Yeah. Next, we're going to take a look at our overall picks and find out if Mac is still winning or if I have finally managed the upset.
What's your prediction for the fight then?
Pain.
There has been no upset. Poor shame. For shame? Poor shame? Whatever. There has been no upset. Alas, I have emerged victorious yet again, beating you by 12 points, even though I had about 2 points less of an accuracy percentage than you did. I'm really not sure how you calculate that. I can only assume that you are incredibly biased.
I was playing with a formula. The accuracy rating
Yeah.
is how close you got to the score. So theoretically, if you get a 100, that means you were perfect. If you got a 0, that means you were perfectly wrong. Most of the scores are somewhere in between.
So I beat you, and yet you had a more accurate prediction than me?
Yes.
Okay.
Overall.
So math.
So individually, that's where it comes down to individual scores are what actually determine the win or loss. Mine is an overall average.
Yeah. Because you've got coin toss and team and all those things going on here.
Right.
Right. Okay. Well, anyway. So for starters, our best call was Northwestern and Penn State, and it was only because Penn State decided to score one last touchdown, which they did not run up the score. I want that clear. I want that right. I want that clear. They didn't run up the score. They had the backup quarterback in. He was running a fake QB sneak and threw the ball because it's a fake, it's a fake QB sneak. So he lunged forward like he was going to run. A lot of people thought he was going to fake the kneel, and then he threw a ball over the middle, over the top, and then went for a touchdown. That was not running up the score. It was a fake QB sneak. Also, there was like 2.5 minutes left in the game. They weren't, and Northwestern had 2 timeouts still. Like they couldn't just kneel the ball. All right. Anyway, so we both got that one really, really close. Me just a tad bit closer because I'm better than you. And what was our worst call? So our worst call was Illinois versus Purdue, and it's not really
ever saw this coming.
Yeah. So for those of you keeping track at home, that guy, the other one on the screen here, has kept saying week after week that Illinois was going to win the West. What sucks about this particular game is that they still could.
This is where you learn that past performance does not indicate future revenue.
Revenue.
Future winnings? What's that statement?
Past performance does not indicate future results.
There you go.
Yeah.
This is most certainly true.
So. Yeah. So apparently Illinois' defense just decided, nah, we good.
Yeah, we're done.
And then Purdue was like, we're not. Like, we're going to do things. So that's that. I guess I frankly can't believe that a Brett Bielema team allowed a first-year head coach to run up the score on him, but he did.
Oh, yeah.
So that's, I think some problems are going on in Champaign, although I expect them to bounce back next year.
And we'll seriously, this has got to be fairly embarrassing for him. That's a teacher surpassing, the student surpassing the teacher.
Yeah.
So this is,
man.
He's got to have a lot of people in his face over there in Champaign, I would think.
We're wondering if Ryan Walters was the reason for their success.
Yeah, exactly.
Uh-oh. And so that was also your most surprising pick, but my most surprising pick was Rutgers and Wagner. Rutgers beat the ever-living crap out of Wagner. It's almost like they're a good team, which, I said that like 2 weeks ago and nobody believed me, but it's crazy because like here they are beating the crap out of bad teams. And I get it, it's Wagner, but like we're also talking about freaking Rutgers.
Yep.
So anyway, this was my surprise though, because I didn't expect them to win by as much as they did. I figured it was going to be a blowout, but boy, they were in control from beginning to end. And that is that. Those are the picks. That's the recap.
Before we get into our picks for next week, let's take a look at the big story for the week, for last week. Before we get into our picks for next week, let's take a look at the big story for this past week. That's what I meant to say.
A good reporter doesn't get great stories, Jimmy.
A good reporter
Makes them great.
So our top story comes out of Michigan State as they search for a new coach. Their current coach, Harlan Bennett, is the official interim head coach and reportedly wants the job. 3 losses in a row are not going to help his resume. These are the names I've heard thrown around, and then Mac, you can talk about the names you've heard thrown around. I don't have a lot to say about these guys, but here's what I'm hearing. Lance Leopold. Currently, he's the head coach at Kansas. He has a record of 12-18 at Kansas. John Smith, not the John Smith who used to coach Michigan State, but a different John Smith who is currently the coach of Oregon State, who has a record of 30-32. Both of those guys, Lance and John Smith, I mean, 2 not great records, so I don't know why they would necessarily be looking for them, although Nick Saban had a terrible record at Michigan State, and now he's Nick Saban. The other name I heard going around is Jake Dickert, who is currently at Washington State with a record of 14-9. So a better record, but we're only talking a couple of seasons here. He's on his 3rd season at Washington State. The only experience we have with him is that he beat Wisconsin a week or 2 ago, 31-22. Out of those 3, I would think Jake Dickert would be the best pick based on record, but whether he's a good fit for Michigan State, I have no idea. Mac, what have you heard?
So I guess I've heard a couple of names too. I've pretty much heard. I've heard of Jake Dickert and Lance Leipold. I didn't hear of John Smith. I'm trying to remember because I think so. Like Lance Leipold and John Smith and Jake Dickert, they don't have like the best records just yet. I'm pretty sure they're all in like their either 2nd or 3rd year at their respective programs.
Mm-hmm.
So they're still kind of like in rebuilding mode. I know Lance Leipold at Kansas is in like year 2. I want to say year 2 or 3. And I might be completely wrong about that. I really hope I'm not, but I'm pretty sure like last year they had like a really bad record. And then this year they're doing a lot better. And it's because of his rebuilding or something like that. That being said, so I've heard all of their names attached. You know, they're good names. I feel like they're good coaches. Don't know a lot about John Smith, but Oregon State, I think, just beat Utah, and Utah's pretty good. So interesting idea there. Mike Elko from Duke has also been mentioned as a possible name. I'm kind of thinking, like, why would he leave Duke where, like, they're ranked, they're having a good season, they knocked off Clemson, knocked off Notre Dame, and he's going to come to Michigan State and have to rebuild an entire culture, all the while playing USC, UCLA, Washington, Oregon, not to mention continuing to have to play Ohio State and now Michigan's elite. So I just kind of feel like Michigan State's going to be fighting for bowl eligibility for the foreseeable future. And I'm not sure what kind of a coach wants to be in the middle of that.
Yeah, that's the big question is the culture at Michigan State. Who's going to want to be a part of that? So it's entirely possible the ACC is about to fracture into a dozen pieces with Clemson possibly coming to the Big Ten. Now, I don't know why they don't just reorganize the FBS into a structure similar to the NFL. The FBS is essentially the minor leagues for the NFL at this point, especially with NIL. On top of that, Clemson coming to the Big Ten might not be good for Clemson. They thought Nebraska was going to rule the Big Ten, and that obviously isn't working out for them. Mac, what do you think about this news or this rumor going around?
Yeah, so I don't want Clemson to come to the Big Ten just in general. I mean, from a fan standpoint, like we wanted better quality games, but the problem is that with so many good teams in the same conference, like the teams are going to start cannibalizing each other. And so, you know, no team is going to have, I mean, with USC, UCLA, Washington, and Oregon all joining, the likelihood that any team goes 12-0 in the Big Ten is like 0. Now add Clemson into the mix, and Clemson is they're down this year, but they're honestly not bad. And that just makes it that much more difficult. So I'm basically like officially in I hate change mode. And while I understand Clemson would bring like even more great talent to the Big Ten, I think if the ACC breaks up, then they need to go to the SEC. because it's just geographically that just makes way more sense, even though geography has just been tossed out the window at this point. But that's just where I'm at. This is just getting stupid.
Now, what are your thoughts though on comparing Clemson to Nebraska? You sort of touched on it, but do you think that Clemson will come into the Big Ten and just rule the roost, or will they end up like Nebraska?
Probably somewhere in the middle, because like I think that with all of these new teams coming in that are just so good, like everybody's going to be beating each other. And so you're going to have a whole bunch of teams in the Big Ten that are 9-3, 8-4, maybe a 10-2 or something like that. I don't know how many teams could possibly win 11 games in a conference that features literally like 10 of the top 15 teams in the country right now. So,
3 anyway.
I mean, 3. Wow, thanks.
Michigan, Ohio State, and Penn State.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look that up to double check it. But it's just a stupid amount of ranked teams right now that would all be in one conference. Like nobody's winning 11 games in that conference.
Right.
Welcome. We are here to destroy you.
This is our coin toss. Now, the way the coin toss works for our score pick system is that it essentially creates a bonus bet. So if you win the coin toss, you get to pick if you want home teams or away teams. And then we count up how many home teams won and how many away teams won, and you get a bonus for every win for your pick. So if you pick the home teams, then you get all of the home team bonus. If you pick the away teams, you get the away team bonus. You get it. It's not that difficult. It's a bonus to our system. So last week I called it. This week Mac is going to call it. Mac, what's your pick? Oh, I'm sorry. No, you got to pick heads or tails first, right? And then we'll see what it is. So Mac, what are you calling? Heads or tails?
I'm going to call tails.
All right. Roll the coin. Flip the coin.
Here we go. And flip. Oh, nuts.
And it's heads. Yes. So I am actually going to go with the away teams just because I love Michigan that much.
Wow. So you're going to get one bonus.
I might get one bonus. But I like to live on the wild side, so I go for the underdogs. That means if Nebraska, Rutgers, Maryland, Howard, and Purdue and Michigan win, I get the big bonus. Otherwise, you get the big bonus.
So I'm going to get the big bonus.
And I lost my notes. Okay, so coming up next, we're going to do our picks and the speed round. Hang in there. We'll get this done.
Fun begins.
In this segment, we each get 1 minute per game to discuss the ranked games of the week and give our prediction. We have 2 ranked games this week, number 2 Michigan at Minnesota and Maryland at number 4 Ohio State. Let's start with Maryland at number 4 Ohio State. Mac, are you ready?
I'm ready.
You are on the clock. Go.
Ohio State is a weird enigma on offense. They put up great numbers, but they look shaky doing it. Notre Dame was a great win for them. Not going to take that away, but again, they had multiple opportunities to put that game away and didn't because of shaky offense. Maryland, on the other hand, has played no one of consequence, whereas Ohio State has been kind of tested already. So this is a game where I think we find out a bit more about who Ohio State is. If they dominate Maryland, then Ohio State's legit. If Maryland makes it a game, then our concerns of Ohio State's offense kind of remain. That said, I think defense and the home field advantage plus the bye week win it for the Bucks. I'm going to take Ohio State 31-17.
Oh, nice. 16 seconds to spare.
Boom. That's what I'm talking about. All right. You are on the clock. Are you ready?
Yes.
And go.
Maryland, the Terps, are 5-0 for the first time since 2001. Mike Locksley is doing, wait for it, a heck of a job. We're going into week 6, and out of the 133 teams in the FBS, 22 are still undefeated, and Maryland is one of them. And they are still unranked, which I think is a travesty, although I guess that goes to strength of schedule. Good wins, good losses come into play, but I honestly feel like the numbers Maryland is putting up, they should at least be in the conversation. The odds makers are saying Maryland is going to lose by 17, but I'm looking at this like Rocky Balboa. A puncher always has a chance, and Maryland is punching away at this season like they haven't in 22 years. I'm going with the big prediction and the upset, 27-24 Maryland.
Hey-o. 2 seconds to spare.
Ooh, nice.
Nice job.
It's the battle for the Little Brown Jug. Number 2, Michigan at Minnesota. This is the 105th meeting of these two teams. Michigan has been in possession of the jug for the last 3 years. Will the Little Brown Jug stay in Ann Arbor? Mac, ready?
I'm ready.
You're on the clock. Go.
Yes, the jug is going to stay in Ann Arbor. Minnesota might have some energy, what with it being a primetime home game, but they nearly got upset by Louisiana. Really? A team that is currently about middle of the pack in a very weak Sunbelt West division. Minnesota didn't go up by more than 2 scores until there was literally just 5 minutes left in the game, and even then they gave up a score not 2 minutes later to ruin even that. So the Gophers are in trouble because the Gophers are in trouble because they're catching Michigan, not because I think anything. They're catching Michigan at a point where I think, this is where I start thinking things, the Wolverines are just now starting to rev up. I don't care how weak Nebraska is. They're a conference opponent, and Michigan made them look like the JV squad. I think Minnesota will probably score once in the first half and then maybe not again until garbage time. Meanwhile, Michigan will basically do whatever they want against a very weak Gopher secondary. Give me Michigan 45-10.
Ooh, all right. Just 1 second over.
Oh. All right. Are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. You are on the clock starting now.
I think this game comes down to trajectory. Michigan is on the way up. Minnesota is on the way down. I was wondering at the beginning of the season if PJ Fleck had peaked at Minnesota. And while the season isn't over yet, he's already lost 2 games, and this one looks to be the 3rd. On paper, Michigan has better stats. On the field, Michigan is bigger, faster, stronger than Minnesota. I think not only is the game going to look a lot like the Rutgers game, but it might just leave Minnesota so bruised and battered they have a difficult time recovering the rest of the season. The one thing Minnesota can be thankful for is Jim Harbaugh doesn't like to run up the score. No surprises here, just smash mouth, in-your-face football. I'm calling Michigan 42-14.
Nice. 11 seconds to spare.
Sweet.
Well done.
Coming up, the speed round.
You think football is still fun?
Yes.
Sir.
Yes.
And now the speed round where we run through the rest of our picks with little to no explanation. One note, Indiana, Michigan State, and Penn State are all on vacation. Bye weeks. Mac, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's go on vacation.
Here we go. Nebraska at Illinois.
Yeah, I really don't know who's going to win this game, so I just decided to go with Illinois because they're at home. So give me Illinois 24-21.
I think these are two frustrated teams in need of a win. Neither one seems to have a statistical edge. I'm going against the line because I think Nebraska has the underdog mentality right now. I'm calling it 27-24 Nebraska. Next game, Rutgers at Wisconsin.
Yeah, Wisconsin, I think, is, I know they're the home team. I think Rutgers is a good team. So I really don't know who's going to win this one either. So I'm going to take Wisconsin 28-24 because I think they might have a slightly better defense.
I agree. Wisconsin is rested up. Rutgers is coming off a gimme. I'm calling Wisconsin 21-17. Next up, we have Howard at Northwestern. This is a first meeting alert. The very first time these two teams have played each other. Mac, what do you got?
Yeah, I got Northwestern 38-17. They're the stronger team. Howard's not gonna keep up.
I'm calling 27-24 Northwestern. I feel the same way. Purdue at Iowa.
So once again, I don't know who's going to win this game because they're both kind of garbage, but Purdue was not really as much garbage against Illinois, but Illinois is also garbage. So Iowa's the home team. They've got the stronger defense. I'm going to take Iowa 24-21. Yeah.
I've got a bit of a sadder outlook on this one. It's Iowa's homecoming game, and I think Purdue is going to show them the door.
Oh,
I'm calling 24-21 the Boilermakers.
spoiler makers even.
I'd call them the Spoilermakers, but there's not much to spoil with Iowa's season.
I mean, I've only got the one loss. It was a good loss too.
I suppose. Still. That's the speed round, folks. Those are our picks. What are your picks? Let us know in the comments if you agree, if you disagree. We want to hear from you. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you stuck with us through the whole video, we thank you even more. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, leave a comment on what you think of our takes on the various games. If you agree, if you disagree, either way, we want to hear from you. Also, since we're heading into week 6, halfway through the season, this is a good time to review our freshman class videos, where we look at Luke Fickell, Ryan Walters, and Matt Rule. We talk about where they've been, what their program is doing, and we predict where they're headed in the future. Great videos to watch. They're about 10 to 12 minutes each. Give them a look and check them out. Mac, take us out.
This is Big Ten Team Rivalry.